I suck at jiu-jitsu. How do I suck less at jiu-jitsu?
I guess to suck less.
Ladies and gentlemen, the diabolical leader of the Head Knocks
Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to the newest episode of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. So today we are going to answer a question. We have hot takes today. I know that's a lot of people's favorite thing that we do on the show, and I can tell by how many hot takes we've gotten between this time and the last time that we've done them. But these hot takes, at least for this week, are going to have a little bit of a theme, or at least probably 10 of the 20 that we will get to will have a little bit of a theme. So we're just going to go ahead and jump into it because I think we're going to do 2 weeks straight of hot takes. I have 40 in front of me that are all very good. And so I think we'll probably get through ideally 20 today and then 20 next week. But I thought a great place to start for the theme of today's episode is going to be the first hot take that I got. I asked for these on Instagram. I think every single one of these actually came from my Instagram story. But the first one is not my opinion, but definitely my wife's opinion. Jiu-jitsu is a cult. So I guess that's a very interesting thought. It's a very interesting place to start today's episode, especially because this is a jiu-jitsu podcast. So am I going to bash all of the things that we do? How is this going to work? I think that it is very important to separate that jiu-jitsu is an art. Okay, so jiu-jitsu is a sport. It's a lot of things to a lot of people. But your gym that you train at, your jiu-jitsu school that you train at, very well could be a cult. There are some defining characteristics of what makes a cult a cult. Maybe we could get somebody on the podcast that really has knowledge on this. But some of the main things that you can see, and this, to me, this comes from having grown up and been in church my whole life. I've been to multiple churches, and I have definitely seen and experienced certain cult-like behavior from people. And we can just kind of define that to start this episode as we get into other people's very specific hot takes on the cult that is jiu-jitsu. So the first thing that you're looking at with a cult is all cults have a cult leader. That is a non-negotiable. That is always how they are. They always have somebody that is above everybody else. By definition, if you have a jiu-jitsu coach, it can feel that way. It can feel like, oh, well, this guy is a cult leader. Everybody listens to him. But everybody listens to him also because he's the business owner and he generally has the most knowledge on the subject when it comes to jiu-jitsu. Now, there are going to be other things that you will start to see. One big thing is behavioral control. You are allowed to do certain things here, and you're not allowed to do certain things. Again, you can have that and it not be a cult. You could say, hey, there are certain rules that we follow to keep a certain standard at this gym. But here is where we start to get to cult-like behaviors. One is if the behavioral control extends outside of the gym. These aren't rules that you have to follow, like don't wear shoes on the mat, wear shoes in the bathroom. Those are rules that don't make your gym a cult at all. That's helpful. There is a reason behind those rules. Now, when it turns into you can't hang out with certain people, you can't go to certain places, you can't cross-train, you can't compete at certain tournaments, you can't think certain things, you can't have certain views on life. And there are, again, these things, there's some back and forth to this because it could be easy to be like, oh yeah, blanket statement. If they say anything that you do outside of the gym is unacceptable, then you're in a cult. I could see someone claiming that, but like, let's, for instance, What if you are like a high-ranking member of that gym? You know, you're not a coach, but you are like, your life is built around that you train at that gym. Everybody knows that you train at that gym. And then you go on some crazy racist rant on Facebook. Well, you have free speech. You should be allowed to do whatever you want, right? But you could easily make the other argument of like, well, if you are a brown belt, if you're a black belt under this coach, you are a representative of this jiu-jitsu team. And if they don't do something about that, if they don't kick you out of the gym for something like that, then maybe they are showing acceptance of that behavior. And so there are going to be things outside of the gym that you could do that can still get you kicked out of the gym. But it is when you aren't allowed to do certain things and there is like, it's either you choose us or you choose, you know, going to your kid's soccer game because we have a jiu-jitsu seminar that day. That's when things can get a little culty. So as we get deeper into this episode, we'll be able to reference back to these things. But then the other thing is, most of the time, the cult leader doesn't have to follow the same rules, or the rules apply differently to that person. And that is what we will probably dig mostly into in these hot takes today. But let's move on to one of our we have a lot of non-cult related hot takes. And I thought this was a great one to really give us both ends of the spectrum of hot takes that we got. So ask for hot takes. Someone said, when you're drilling triangles and your training partner is not wearing compression shorts. I would assume that this is drilling no-gi triangles. And that is why you're not allowed to, or that's why wearing compression shorts matters. Yeah, you know what's funny too is like, at least now, most of the shorts that you see worn are like, there's kind of a standard jiu-jitsu short. They're kind of flexible. They're generally a little tighter now. When I started jiu-jitsu, Sprawl was like the brand. That was, if you were doing no-gi, if you were wearing Sprawl gear, that was like the pinnacle. Like, you were a legit jiu-jitsu guy. If you were wearing tap out stuff, maybe you were, maybe you weren't. You might be kind of a poser. But if you were wearing Sprawl, it was like, that was it. Sprawl had you could fit both of your legs in one of the leg holes with Sprawl. So if you didn't wear compression shorts, you were, you know, your wiener was bouncing around, and that wasn't not cool. Not a cool thing. And so, I don't know, don't drill triangles with the dude that's not wearing compression shorts. Don't drill triangles in no-gi. Put on some gi pants, man. You won't have this problem. That is... Yeah, that's all we'll get into in drilling triangles. Let's move on. Next hot take. If your coach insists that you call him professor outside of the gym, congratulations, you've joined a cult. Yeah, I could see that. I could see how the extension, you guys know that I'm not big into the professor thing. I really don't care for it at all. But that's just more of a preference for me. It just doesn't, I don't feel super comfortable being called professor. And that's the reason I don't care for it. My coach never asked me to call him professor. And so that was, you know, and no one really calls my coach professor. Is like, call him, you know, Kyle, his name. But yeah, I had one student forever that thought it was really funny to call me sensei, and always called me that just because he knew that if professor made me uncomfortable, that sensei would make me 10 times more uncomfortable. But yeah, I could see, I don't know, maybe some people you call professor, I don't know, some people are really into it. That's like part of jiu-jitsu to them, is that there is this guy that has sacred knowledge, and that he is sharing that sacred knowledge with you, and he has dedicated so much time. It is the equivalent to if he had a doctorate in jiu-jitsu. And so that's kind of the idea. And we did talk a lot deeper on the episode about do belts matter. We did it like, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks ago. But we talked deeply on this idea of what is the requirement once you get your black belt. not like to get your black belt, but what should you do after you get your black belt? And I did reference that like people call jiu-jitsu black belts professors, and I don't think that they behave that way most of the time. In my opinion, you should, as a black belt, you should try to research something, right? That's what a professor does. Is, you always hear about professors talking about funding their research. And to me, like that is, I think you have a really good base once you get your black belt of knowledge. But honestly, there is, in my opinion, like level 1 to level 5 of black belt. There are 5 belts on top of black belts, but they're imaginary. And it's just kind of skill. Once you get to like level 1 black belt, you probably are now good enough to dedicate a year of your jiu-jitsu to studying a specific position, studying a specific idea, a year or more of your jiu-jitsu to do that. And you will probably come away from that deep research with new findings. And so I can see that there is some correlation to a professor. And that's why people are called that. And some people just, I don't know, some coaches just prefer to be called professor. I don't know. I'll say this. Master, 10 times weirder to me than professor. I don't care for professor that much, but master, if you have to call your coach, if you had to call me Master Josh, I think that is, we're getting to cult-like behavior. That feels crazy to me. Then, especially if you had to do that outside of training, not a fan. Let's go ahead and we will move on. Let's move on to number 4. A coach who bans cross-training is either insecure about his techniques or insecure about his students finding out that he is a fraud. I would love to play devil's advocate on this one. But banning cross-training is also crazy to me. I think that is something that stifles growth in jiu-jitsu. I remember one time, this was probably, and things are now getting a lot closer to, go cross-train. Like that's accepted almost everywhere, but it's still not accepted everywhere. And I remember early on, I was, as always, I was an early adopter of these things. So in 2015, I started an open mat that was open to anyone who did jiu-jitsu in my area. Because my theory was, if my students got more diverse reps, even if the people weren't as good, but they got different looks from different people, then throughout the week, we would be able to work on specific things, right? And work on like, oh man, all these guys played knee shield and none of us really played knee shield. So we can work on beating knee shield now. And that got exposed to us in the gym instead of having to go to a tournament for us to realize that was a hole in our understanding or a hole in our game. And so that was why I thought it was smart to allow other people to come into our gym. But then the other side of it was the same thing for me, was like, go do other people's open mats, because you'll get that same experience. You'll get to go with 20 guys that have a different game than you ever experience. And then again, you'll be able to see holes in your jiu-jitsu and ideally start to fix them. Now, what would happen though is so many of my guys would come back and be like, yeah, I went to this open mat. Like I called them before and or texted them before and they were like, oh yeah, come on in. And then you'd be like, yeah, they tried to then get me to sign up at their gym. And I was like, oh no, I'm not shopping around for gyms. I already have a home gym. And then they would be like, oh, well, don't come back. You can't come to our open mat. And I remember having conversations with students being like, yeah, their open mats aren't open. And I'm like, yeah, we're the weirdos. We're the ones that have open mats that are open. But now seeing how, and that was like, it was more acceptable to not really allow cross training and not allow other people to come into cross train. you're seeing it in some places that you're not allowed cross training. And in my opinion, I never, ever, ever, ever see it from a highly skilled, competitive, like black belt level coach. It's always the people that don't allow cross training are always sus when it comes to their jiu-jitsu. Their jiu-jitsu is always like, this guy's never won anything. He's never beaten up anyone who's good. Anyone who I've ever talked to that said they got to roll with him, like, yeah, he kind of sucked. And those are the guys nowadays that don't allow cross training. And again, to me, this is weird behavioral stuff anyway. Like, why? Why aren't you allowed to cross train? And so if somebody isn't allowed to cross train, I would love if you gave a comment and let us know, like, is there actually something that someone says that is like, oh yeah, you can't cross train? Because here's how it is to me is like, anyone who's gotten really good at jiu-jitsu has gotten that way through training with good people, and through a ton of reps and a ton of really quality reps. Nobody really gets good just from learning moves, because if they did, we would all just go and sign up for whatever the best online program is right now and buy a bunch of instructionals. And then, those are the best coaches anyway, the ones that are putting out great content like that. And then we would all just be really good at jiu-jitsu. But that's not how it works. You need quality reps. You need good training partners to make it easier to get better. It's possible to get better without as good of training partners, but you do need good training partners most of the time to get better. And so the coach that doesn't allow you to do that, why aren't they letting you do that? I don't have any logical reason that I've ever heard of why cross training is banned. The only logic that makes sense to me is you can't go train there because I'm afraid that you'll leave. And one, that's your right. As a consumer, you're allowed to leave a jiu-jitsu school. That is okay. And then also, it's back to that idea of trying to control your behavior outside of the gym. Like, wait, I'm still paying gym dues. I'm still a member here, but I get in trouble for going and visiting another school's open mat. So like am I allowed to go and rock climb somewhere? Am I allowed to go do CrossFit somewhere? Like what am I and what am I not allowed to do? How crazy is it that when you are not at the gym, they still push a behavior? Maybe if the school that you were going to open mat at was notorious for staph infections and ringworm, and everybody had them and nobody ever took care of them, maybe then it would be okay to discourage cross-training at a specific place. But besides that, it feels like cult-like behavior to me. This episode is brought to you by Datsu Sara. So it was really cool. I got to teach a seminar in Wisconsin, a 608 Jiu-Jitsu last weekend. And it was really fun to go in and have my Datsu Sara backpack that I've been bringing everywhere. And I got multiple people asking me like to see the backpack, to feel it, to check out the material. And everybody there was like, oof, this is pretty sweet. I think I should get me one of these. And because Datsu Sara loves the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, they are giving a discount to I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show listeners. If you go to dsgear.com, you can use promo code ISUCK to get 10% off of anything in the store. But I've just been just highlighting for you guys how awesome this backpack is. I have the 40 liter right now, and it is material-wise incredible. I've taken it on multiple trips already. The amount of jiu-jitsu gear that I can hold in it is 10 out of 10. There was a shower at this place that I taught the seminar at, and I was able to open up the toiletry part of my bag, pull out my Datsu Sara hemp towel that, of course, rolls up so small, makes it so easy. My soap, everything else I needed, and of course, I had a whole entire wardrobe in my backpack, also on top of having my gi in it. And I was able to shower there, no problem, no fuss, no muss, and then take my drive home. It was very, very nice to have that. But just big thank you to Datsusara for sponsoring the show. And be sure, if you're an I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show listener, to support the people that support us. And go to dsgear.com and use promo code ISUCK to get 10% off your entire purchase. Let's get back to the episode. Next hot take. BJ Penn is probably right. This was the funniest hot take I think that I got on that. If you guys don't know, it's a horrible thing to laugh about, but we will laugh at it together. BJ Penn is having a mental breakdown right now. He claims that his mom was killed by the government and then replaced by a clone or an actress, something like that. And so, that was a 10 out of 10 hot take. And, maybe he is. That's something about social media that's really scary now, is that one of the things that pops highest on your feed is people having mental health crises. It's almost as if that is what Instagram was made for. And then what's also really eerie about seeing that and witnessing somebody, especially somebody like BJ Penn, that, a lot of people, you came up during the time that I came up doing jiu-jitsu, you were a BJ Penn fan because he was one of the only guys representing jiu-jitsu. He's like the only world champion. Was he the only world champion to ever, black belt world champion to ever hold the UFC title? I know he was the first, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, if there's somebody else who can hit me with a UFC fact, let me know. But he might have still be the only jiu-jitsu world champion that held, black belt world champion that held a title, and black belt gi world champion that held a UFC title. But you were a fan of him then, and then seeing him, talk about that is really sad. And you also, though, what's weird about seeing these mental breakdowns, and there have been a few public ones recently, and we've even talked about them, but there are times that these people have such belief that what they believe is true, that it can almost convince you, and you'd be like, oh my gosh, maybe the government did kill his mom. And it's eerie. It's why, even though I'm literally doing a hot takes episode that I got from Instagram, it's why I hate Instagram. And it's why I never respond to any messages, because on my phone, I don't keep Instagram or Facebook, and it makes life a lot easier to do that. And you would think, I run a couple of businesses, you would think that but you're missing all these business related things. Nobody ever sends me any business related thing. It's just it's always just random crap that I get, and then I can also, my cousin made fun of me the other day for saying this, but I always will check, Instagram DMs on my desktop. And she's like, that's the oldest thing that I've ever heard in my life. I'm like, dude, that's brutal. I don't know. I think that's normal. But let's move on. We'll go to hot take number 6. Jiu-jitsu as an industry is moving away from the cult-like teams and things like mandatory uniforms. Jiu-jitsu as an industry... Oh, wait. I repeated that one. I think I messed up how I copy and pasted this. But this person went on to say that this is why there is currently such a boom in no-gi. And I can see that for sure. My opinion on it is just a little different. I definitely think that there are a lot of, I would say that there were a lot more cult-like behaviors before, earlier in jiu-jitsu. It was, for me, just coming up in jiu-jitsu, it was like, it was so hard. There was no way to shop around. And now it's like, if you went to a school and you were there for a year and you started to really notice cult-like stuff, you could probably just go drive 5-10 minutes in the other direction and train at a different gym. That really wasn't an option. And so it was kind of like, if you want to train jiu-jitsu, you have to put up with these things. But then it also allowed this like exclusivity of jiu-jitsu coaches where they could be like, oh, well, I am the only black belt in the city. I am the king of this city, right? And now people are getting away from that. But in my opinion, too, the reason that, I mean, I'm not exaggerating, out of the 40 usable hot takes that I got, about 10 of them were about cult-like behavior. What you'll find is the people that are screaming about that jiu-jitsu is a cult currently, they all came up and under, a lot of times the same person, but came up for a long time and then had a falling out with their coach. And then they're like, oh yeah, this is a cult. I don't know if you guys have seen, like, I think a perfect example of this is Avandro Nunes. And this, again, this was this guy putting all the stuff in public. I'm not trying to bash anybody specifically, but he's just put so much in public recently that has made this visible, right? And his big selling point on his new program was escape the jiu-jitsu cult. And, whatever, blinded by the black belt, I think is what it is. And it's like $1,700. If anybody purchased that, I would love for you to give me a review. I didn't have $1,700 to, my curiosity wasn't piqued enough. It was piqued, but not enough. But he came out saying a lot of bad things about Hinner and Huron. And if you followed the drama as much as I did, and you got to listen to every one of the interviews, every one of the debate between Hinner and him, which was insane. But what you will probably come to the conclusion of, and this is what most people did come to the conclusion of, was that when things were all said and done, he sounded like a disgruntled employee. And the perfect buzzword to attack people with is, oh, you're a cult. You're a cult. And it's very easy to throw that word around. It's like the jiu-jitsu version of racist in politics now. Racist, or what is the one people use now? Because racist is not, like, it's not the buzzword as much anymore. Fascist. I don't know what that means. I looked up what, I looked up in the dictionary what a cult is defined as before this, but I didn't look up what a fascist is. But it's kind of like, oh, you're in a cult, is very much this insult that is being thrown around, like, oh no, they're more of a cult than we are. I really like the term in understanding that jiu-jitsu is very tribal, meaning like you train under the same roof with the same group of people, and then it, for some reason, just becomes this, oh, it's us versus them mentality. And it's like everybody else is them, but we are the intelligent ones, and we are the smart ones, and we are the great ones. And people push this, and it's like, when coaches feed into this, everybody feeds into it. It's so easy to, because one, you get somebody from a different gym. You like maybe the gym down the street you feel like is a cult, okay? Then one of their students quits because of something that happened, and they come and they start training at your gym. What do they tell you? What are the things that they're going to feed you? They're going to be like, oh yeah, definitely a cult. They try to make me face the wall when I tie my belt, right? I don't know if people even know that, if people even do that anymore, but that was a jiu-jitsu tradition that people were really big on when I was coming up. And that was like, they do certain things like that. And they're like, oh my gosh, there's rules there. That makes it a cult. To be honest, most of those rules, they're irrelevant because they don't affect you negatively, making you face the wall and tie your belt. And even mandatory uniforms, I don't think that is what defines a jiu-jitsu gym as a cult. It's a business. These guys, they make you buy mandatory uniforms for money. That's the reason that they do that. Maybe some people do want to control who you are and control, but from coaches that I've talked to that do this and gyms that I've heard of that do this, I really think it's more of a money thing than anything. No one ever makes you buy mandatory uniforms that are $99. They're expensive. They add more pricing into the logos for their gym, right? I have students that come from other gyms and wear the gis that have old gyms patches for years. And I really couldn't care less. It's not, that's irrelevant to me. But would I increase my revenue if I said, no, you guys have to buy exclusive head nod gis? Because you know who controls the supply and demand? You know who controls the price of head nod gis? It's me. And so it would be helpful for me to do this. I don't do it because I like freedom and I like my students to have freedom. Does that mean that I'm the only non-cult leader in town? Probably not. I think it's more tribal than anything. I think it's more us against them than anything. And what you'll find too, and this is why I went to that original Evandro Nunes thing, is so many people that are screaming cult right now are going to realize that they want to monetize their jiu-jitsu. But they've labeled all of these certain practices as no, cult behavior, evil people, right? And they've labeled all this stuff. And then they're going to come to this day where they realize, well, if I want to make money doing jiu-jitsu, I should probably sell a $1,700 online course, which seems a little bit culty. It's very hard to create especially in the vacuum that jiu-jitsu is now, to create a gym or a school free of cult-like behavior. And I would love to believe that I do have that. But who knows? I'm sure if you got all of my students privately and you ask them certain things, I'm sure some of them would be like, oh yeah, I don't like this. I don't like that part of head nod. And you'd be like, cult. And so I just think that this is being thrown around a lot to me, it seems as though it's weird. I'm in a weird generational part of jiu-jitsu. I will say certain things like the generation after me, but the truth is it's probably even my jiu-jitsu generation. I just started coaching jiu-jitsu and running my own school like 9 years before anyone else in my generation, right? I started as a purple belt running my own school. So I've experienced these things for a long enough time to be like, yeah, it's this buzzword being thrown around constantly. People are being attacked with it constantly. But is it true? Sometimes yes. Sometimes it is. We have more hot takes that we'll really dig into that are I think will be helpful for people to really define what a coach is. I thought this was funny to just throw in after the person talking about mandatory uniforms. Somebody said, the only thing stricter than the uniform policy is the unspoken rule that you are not allowed to question the uniform policy. And, again, it's like a lot of these things to me are more like mandatory uniforms, uniform policies. Yes, I think they are a money-making scheme. I think that's why people mostly do them. But then sometimes it's just like, a coach doesn't want people, they need to have some type of line, right? Because they don't want people to wear tie-dye gis, right? And so maybe they go only white, black, blue gis, right? Something like that. There was a period where one of my friends' schools, they had all white mats. And they were having problems with people's gi colors literally rubbing off on the mat. And so they had to have a white gi policy. And is that cult-like? That's a logical reason. Things seem cult-like to me when they're unexplainable, when they're rules just for rules. And I remember that's why, like I referenced earlier, that growing up in church, I've seen these things so many times, is because it's so common for people in church to be like, oh no, you aren't allowed to do this. You can't do this. This is evil. I went to a school and you weren't allowed to go to the movie theater. Not that you weren't allowed to watch movies. It was just like this defining thing of like, oh yeah, if you go to the movie theater, you're going to hell, dude. And I remember even one time somebody asked about that rule. And the explanation, at least they actually had an explanation. Usually it's just like, because we said so. But the explanation was like, well, even if you're watching Winnie the Pooh, you're still supporting, evil Hollywood elites that are all pedophiles. Looking back, that was probably true. And that I have a conspiracy episode coming out for you guys in a couple weeks, and we'll get way more into those type of things. But right now, I guess I'm too deep on this. We'll leave that alone. Let's go ahead and take a quick commercial break. This episode is brought to you by BJJ Mental Models and their free course that they are giving away to I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show members. So right now, if you are somebody who does not feel like they understand Jiu-Jitsu, I have something that will make you be able to understand Jiu-Jitsu. So all coaches would agree, if you start training 10, you train 12, 15 years, you will start to see Jiu-Jitsu simpler. And this is, to me, what we should all be trying to attain, because if you can simplify the 100 guard passes that you know with just a few basic ideas that you're trying to accomplish over and over, it makes it so much easier to make decisions, but it also makes it so much easier to problem solve when something isn't working. And one of the easiest ways to have a foundation, a framework in your jiu-jitsu is to sign up for the free course Jiu-Jitsu for Imbeciles by Rob Bernacki that is only available at bjjmentalmodels.com/isuck. This is exclusive for I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show listeners, and this is a game changer. This thing can help you make your jiu-jitsu so much easier to understand and, again, easier to problem solve. And I mean, when you really think about how beneficial, how expensive that should be, and then you look at the fact that it's free on bjjmentalmodels.com/isuck, it is crazy that they are giving this away. So be sure to check out Jiu-Jitsu for Imbeciles. Let's get back to the episode. And we are back. So on that topic, I just did a commercial on for mental models, but on that cult topic, mental models, Steve Kwan on Reddit had an awesome quote, and I'm paraphrasing it. I don't have it in front of me. But somebody had asked something along the lines of, is the gym that I am at a cult? And he gave this list, and Steve had the top comment. The top comment was, a lot of people have asked these type of things. And what I found is, if you have to ask that question, the answer is typically yes. And I think that is a very good argument. I think that so much of it is not going to be somebody telling you that your gym is a cult. It is going to be things that you experience that you question. You say, that doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right for them to be able to control this aspect of my life. Or I think another one that's really big is the coach was caught doing something that we would consider immoral, that we would consider evil, but there was no repercussion. Like, we just have to accept that. But if I did that same thing, or somebody else did that same thing, there would be repercussion. That is, to me, one of the big defining characteristics of it. But let's move on. We are on hot take number 8. Butt scooters look like they are dogs with itchy butts. Wipe better. There is always, like, when I ask for hot takes, most of the hot takes that I don't use are about people won't learn takedowns, or people that complain about guys that pull guard can't pass the guard. right? And I think that either way, I think that butt scooters look like dogs with itchy butts is hilarious. And I don't, is it itchy butts? Is that why they rub their butt on the carpet? Isn't it the glands on their butt that get impacted and they're trying to relieve that? Or maybe I'm just making things up. I could be totally wrong. But either way, I think that as you get better, and I'll say this, if you're older, if you are smaller, wrestling can be the most dangerous part of jiu-jitsu. I mean, even if you're not older or smaller, wrestling can be the most, or stand-up can be the most dangerous part of jiu-jitsu. Why? Because both of you have access to all your athleticism because your feet are planted on the ground. And then on top of that, there's just so many more chances for explosive movements. And then on top of that, gravity has the chance of smashing either of you into the ground. And so I get people that don't want to do stand-up ever, just want to pull guard. Totally get it. That being said, I think what makes a good jiu-jitsu athlete, what makes a good jiu-jitsu practitioner, and this is my definition. This isn't, in the book of Elio. This is just my opinion on this, is you should be able to grapple your way out of any scenario. And so, like, if you were put on the feet and you had to get the match to the ground, you should have a way to do that. If not, it's a really big hole in your jiu-jitsu, because then, you can go, oh, well, rule sets make the top guy engage. Well, what if they didn't? Would you be able to grapple in that situation? Right? Because that's a defining thing. It's not like we're saying, oh, add strikes to this. But what if there was a scenario where you needed to take somebody down? You not being able to do that is a huge hole in your jiu-jitsu game. And so, like, in a real life scenario, in a fight, not being able to take somebody down, and ideally, like, you don't want to play bottom anyway in a real fight. Have you ever people that have this idea of like, oh yeah, I would pull guard in a fight? Try to play guard against anybody on concrete. You don't move the same way as you do on 2-inch thick mats with a 4-inch subfloor. Like, it's not the same. Your body will get destroyed, and the amount of friction from concrete or just most ground is totally different. And so being able to play top, so important for a real life scenario. And I don't know. I think that there is good arguments for making fun of people that butt scoot. But then I also think if somebody does just sit on their butt in a jiu-jitsu match, you can't pass their guard. That's your job, right? When it comes to wrestling, like, oh, you want to wrestle, but the guy sits down and then you're mad. It's like, well, why did you want to wrestle? Weren't you wanting to wrestle to play top? And that's, again, it's just a disconnect. This is not enough layers in your ability to grapple. You should be, if you really want to take down that bad, you should be thrilled when the person sits on their butt, because now you have all of that energy not wasted, and you should be able to pass their guard. And so I don't know. I don't know why people complain about either of them. Just take the guy down, pass the guy's guard, submit the guy off your back. It doesn't matter. Be in any scenario and be dangerous, right? I think that's more important for grappling. Next one, jiu-jitsu teams suck and grapplers don't need them anymore. Again, I'm hearing this so much from my generation, or maybe the generation just right after me. So much. People like, I think that jiu-jitsu teams, jiu-jitsu affiliations are a scam. And I would say that is true sometimes, a lot of the time, even a majority of the time, that jiu-jitsu affiliations are a scam. Now, there are reasons for jiu-jitsu affiliations. Again, though, these things, you don't want to just blanket these things. Be like, oh yeah, just, any jiu-jitsu team sucks. It is a scam. You have to look at the benefit of being on that team. Because some teams, there is a huge benefit. Some teams you are on and it gives you access to training partners that you would never have access to. Some teams you're on and it gives you, some teams have online programs that are really good that if you're a part of that team, you and your students even get access to that online program. Now, some teams just have enough reputation that they just collect a check each month for you to have their patches and follow their rules. If you're looking at, and don't get me wrong, I've had a lot of friends that have left their jiu-jitsu teams and ask me for counsel before that they did, right? And ask me like what I thought about their situation. And most of the time, their situation just didn't make sense. It felt as though you're paying somebody, man, I don't want to quote numbers, but there are people that spend like hundreds and thousands of dollars a year, not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds and thousands of dollars a year to be on a team, to be on an affiliation. And all it does is it puts a logo on your wall, and then it has somebody who really doesn't care about you that much, who gives you orders that you have to accept, that you have to respond to. Dude, I'm trying to be I didn't realize how many good examples I would have of cult-like behavior, but I wouldn't want to share because I don't want to kind of ostracize any of my homies. But man, maybe there are a lot of people in jiu-jitsu cults as I get deeper into this episode, because I've had a lot of examples pop into my head that I'm like, oh, I can't say that. They're still a member of that cult. But I've had people not be able to film instructionals because their coach was like, yeah, you can't, those are our techniques. I'm like, what? I had people, man, most of these things are like money-making scams, okay? Most of the affiliations that people are on, and I've had this conversation with so many people, and keep in mind, I am part of an affiliation that is rapidly growing too, and I am in full support of that affiliation being Tag Team. But for me, it's the benefit. Does it benefit me and my guys, right? And yes, it does. It does. Like, for example, one thing is like Tag Team in St. Louis is very strong. St. Louis area that I'm from is very strong. And it allows us to kind of have a team that can benefit with each other, that can cross-train with their guys, that can cross-train with each other. And you just have support of other coaches. That's a weird thing. When you become a coach, a lot of times you stop having a coach as much, right? Your coach doesn't see you day to day, doesn't help you with the parts of your jiu-jitsu. And being able to get with the other coaches in my affiliation and train together and help each other is a huge benefit. But then the leadership of, if you have a good leader that that, man, I have this backup of this guy that I could call that actually cares about the scenario I'm in and can actually help me. That is huge. The other thing is, and this is my biggest reason for a jiu-jitsu affiliation, I think my affiliation is really built on this, is winning team trophies is really fun, because there is this camaraderie that comes from like, hey, all of our gyms in our area are going to all train together for a specific tournament. And then and then a lot of our friends from out of town, our friends from Kansas City, our friends from Chicago, our friends from Wisconsin, our friends from just any of the other affiliates that we have, they come in and we all try to win that tournament together. And then it's even fun to be from where I'm at and go to Chicago and help those guys win their big tournament, or go to Kansas City and help those guys win their big tournament. It's just something fun about having a team. And it just, to me, having people around you, having peers around you will help you grow. It's so common though that people have a bad experience with it and they go, well, I'll go do my own thing. And that's fine. Do your own thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's going to be a point where you're doing your own thing, if you do it long enough, that you start to produce purple and brown belts and even black belts. And then what are you going to do? Are you just going to tell them, okay, go off, you're on your own now? Because a lot of them, honestly, they won't want that. A lot of them will be like, well, I want to start a gym, but I want to start it under you. Wait a second, now you're the cult leader, right? Now you're the one who has all these affiliates under you. How are you going to act? And so it's like, back to religion. You see a lot of people that will have a big problem with their church and they'll go, well, I'm going to leave and I'm going to fix all these problems and I'm going to start me a new church. And because the church that I was at is a cult. And then it's not uncommon that a couple of years later, you're hearing about old boy that left and everyone's saying, yeah, he's a cult leader, right? There is just this there is this saying, and it's be careful when you chase the monster that you don't become the monster. And you see this with I'm going to make a change. I'm going to, we're going to do everything different at my gym, because it goes long enough and then things start to turn into the exact same thing that you tried to escape. Now you have your own affiliation. And so I don't think that inherently a jiu-jitsu team is evil, but it's just like, I don't think that a uniform policy is inherently evil. It's important though that there can be explanation. It's important that there is logic and that you can say like, I have this affiliation because I am part of this affiliation because. If the only reason is because you think that people care about that, like you think your students care that like, oh yeah, okay, I'll give a good example. One of my friends was in the middle of leaving his team because of definite cult-like behaviors. And he was going to leave his coach, but he was like, I think I should stay part of my affiliation, right? And I was like, I don't know, why do you think that? And as we talked more, like, yeah, it sounds like those behaviors that you are trying to avoid come from the very top of this affiliation too, right? Like what you allow a lot of the times for your own sake, you have to allow for your students, right? And like I'm seeing all this cult-like behavior from the top of it. And he goes, yeah, but won't people not want to train at my gym because I don't have that logo on my gym? Like, dude, a brand new person doesn't know what that even means. They don't see the name and go, oh, look, it's whatever affiliation. I love them. I care about them. No, they're brand new. They don't know anything about jiu-jitsu. You can just start your own thing and it not be a big deal. And so, just I totally get why someone would want to not have a jiu-jitsu team and not even mess with it and not deal with it. But I also get why someone would want to do it. Regardless of which path you choose, it's very important that it's logical. It's very important that it benefits. And I think one of the 7 habits of highly effective people is to think win-win. And so in the scenario, you have to ask yourself, is this a win for the top of the affiliation? And is it a win for me? Because if it's not on one side or the other, that's going to be a problem later on. And so, or, is me not being part of an affiliation, is it a win for me? And is it a win for my students? If the answer is yes, then I think you should stay not part of an affiliation. There was a point where Kyle, my coach, was totally unaffiliated. And I was like, okay, I'll stay under Kyle forever. Kyle is my guy. And he called me and my dad. and was like, hey, Jared really wants us to join tag team. And we had met Jared 3 or 4 times, and he had asked me a few other times about different affiliations. Like, I don't like that idea. I don't like that idea. And then he asked me about tag team, and I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. We're all in. And he was like, really? Why did you, why so quickly were you on that? And I'm like, well, I met this dude, and he has leadership qualities that just hanging around him will benefit me. And that would be helpful for Kyle too, because he wanted some leadership. And so I'm very thankful that we did that. So like I said, I don't think that it's inherently good or inherently evil. Let's move on. This was a good one. I thought about including it, not including it, but I included it. Jiu-Jitsu Games was better than Squid Game / Mr. Beast games. Some lost their souls to, I had to redact that part, but other people lived. I can't really talk too much about the Jiu-Jitsu Games right now. We're in the middle of the editing process, but just know that Jiu-Jitsu's first game show is very close to coming out. I'll have a date, hopefully within the next week, I'll have an actual release date for you guys. But if you don't follow Josh McKinney BJJ YouTube channel, you should probably follow that. That is going to be, I'm telling you guys that, I mean, maybe I could be wrong, could totally fall flat and suck. But I got to give a shout out to executive producer Bryce on this one. Unbelievable idea. The execution was awesome. And I think that we have something really cool on our hands. That's all I can tell you. Let's move on. If your coach has ever given you life advice, this is so good. If your coach has ever given you life advice, just know he probably owes back taxes and child support. So what's funny about this is there are so many coaches that like, okay, it's like, this is your jiu-jitsu coach. But then he's also your nutritionist. He's also your doctor too. He's also your pastor. And then on top of that, he also, gives you legal advice. And on top of that, he also gives you advice on whether or not you should go to a new job, And on top of that, he gives you relationship advice. And it's weird because people will ask me, like students will ask me the most bizarre things in a sense that like, yeah, I have no qualification for this. Like people will ask me certain things. I'll be like, hey, that I have a high school diploma, right? Like, that is the end. This tax advice that you're asking me right now, like, I don't know. I am doing my best to pay my own taxes, buddy. Like, I don't know what the heck you're asking me about, or relationship advice or whatever. People will do this all the time, and they'll ask their jiu-jitsu coach that has 3 failed marriages relationship advice. Like, hey, this guy probably isn't the guy. He's probably not the best fit for this. But it's something about how people will put their coach on this pedestal and say like, yeah, this guy knows everything. He will help me. And maybe your coach does, because there are definitely times that, coaches can be very philosophical, because jiu-jitsu really can change who you are and can really help you learn things. And once you learn mastery of jiu-jitsu, or you learn to be high level at jiu-jitsu, sometimes it can allow you to learn what it takes to be high level at other things. But Robert Kiyosaki has a funny thing where he says, just because he's your brother-in-law doesn't mean you should ask him advice about the law. Like, those are not correlated. Get an attorney, right? And so, yeah, if there is one thing that should probably change in the jiu-jitsu world, it's like, brother, asking your Brazilian coach who's been here for 2 years and barely speaks any English really deep questions about your business that you just started, or whether or not you should start a business, or whatever, just things that aren't jiu-jitsu, he's probably not the guy. Now, with any advice, if you can ask somebody something and they're really good at giving you advice on it, and you test that advice out and it works, you're probably going to be confident asking that person for more advice. But yeah, I just don't know if I would. The other thing is, I don't think anyone put this in. Don't ever loan your jiu-jitsu coach money. That seems to be a big red flag when it comes to jiu-jitsu coaches. Okay, so this is funny. So I always get, when I ask for hot takes and when I ask for questions, if you guys have followed me on Instagram, one of the most common ones that I get is something along the lines of, "You're gay," or "Josh is gay." I don't know why that is always the funny joke that I get. And someone was asking, like, why do you always include those? Why do you always share one of those each time? Well, now it's just like, it's become an inside joke of like how often I get asked. But I thought that this was a more creative one. And so number 12, a lot of Asian men are secret gay, which I feel like was directed at me. But I'm only half Asian, so that doesn't even count. But then this one also was funny, and it also was Asian too. We all bust his tiny Asian balls, but Josh McKinney is the best jiu-jitsu athlete in the Midwest. I like where your head's at. I wanted to be like, thanks, Mom, but I don't know why my mom would have said, we all bust his tiny Asian balls. But yeah, that was a very kind thing to say. I like that. I like that claim. Do I think it's true? I don't know. Maybe we'll see. Maybe someone could prove us wrong, but who knows? Next hot take. The more a coach preaches loyalty, the more likely he is sleeping with a student's wife. Listen, you want cult-like behavior. Weird sex stuff from your coach, that's a huge red flag. Your coach is sleeping with his white belts. Your coach is sleeping with his white belts' wives. Get out of there. To me, that is no time ever has that been the only thing with a coach. It is always like, oh yeah, he was sleeping with students' wife, and then as more things come out, you will find more horrible things. And the reason that this is anybody who puts themselves, even in their own mind, anybody who puts themselves on a different level as others, anyone who puts themselves at like, not just I am more important, but the rules shouldn't apply to me, right? Because I'm sure your coach would be very offended if one of the students was sleeping with their wife, right? You would probably get kicked out of the gym for that. But the coach is just going to keep running class, and then, I don't know, usually the move is that they marry that girl and then trade her in like 5 to 7 years later. That's usually the move. But if that is happening at your gym, you should run. It is not only is that itself wrong, but it to me has always seemed as though a sign of something deeper. And I don't know if preaching loyalty and sleeping with wives are directly correlated, but I thought that was a great joke, or a great line. And so that's really what I meant early when I was talking about like that there is this cult leader and then rules don't apply to that person. And this is like a defining thing to me is like, I think that if you choose to be a jiu-jitsu coach, it should automatically, even if you're single, it should automatically be blanket that if somebody walks into your gym and even if you find them super attractive, even if they find you attractive, you should have a hard line in place that says, no, I will not date somebody who's a student or even that was a student. That creates such drama in your gym, right? And you go to a lot of gyms and it feels as though their whole, it's like this is jiu-jitsu / Tinder in person. It's like everybody's dating everybody, and that, like, again, you can't control that as a coach if people are going to date each other, but you can definitely control your own actions. And I just think that is something that really produces a lot of bad stuff in your gym. Just think about it logically. Like, let's say that you do date girls at your gym, right? And then after you guys break up or stop dating or whatever, what if one of the other guys at the gym starts dating her? Is he going to feel like, oh man, the coach treats me differently now because because of this? Or like, you see people take sides. I remember this guy, and poor guy, I don't even remember his name. Really, really nice guy, had a ton of jiu-jitsu potential. I used to train with him when I was still training, like not at my gym, but when I was still a student. But it was like he brought in his girlfriend, and they had been dating for like 2 months, and she loved jiu-jitsu. And she was honestly just had a lot better of a personality than he did. And I remember thinking like, ooh, this is probably a bad idea. Like, it's not like you're bringing in your wife. You're bringing in, or someone you dated for a long time. Like, they've barely been together. Like, you guys, like, statistics would say you guys are going to break up eventually. And only one of you is going to get to keep the gym. And sure enough, old boy and her broke up. And he got booted. It's not like it happened. Not like everyone takes a vote, but you can just tell, like, I want to say he cheated on her. And so then he was ultimately the evil guy. Everybody hated him. Stopped training jiu-jitsu. Had potential, but we call it the kiss of death when your relationship gets in the way of your jiu-jitsu. Don't allow it. Don't allow it. That was hilarious though. Preaches loyalty, more likely sleeping with a student's wife. 10 out of 10 on whoever gave that hot take. Self-defense comes first, says the guy who hasn't thrown a punch since middle school. I think the self-defense comes first thing is a way of discouraging jiu-jitsu competition most of the time, like going and competing at tournaments. Again, weird to me that there are people that discourage jiu-jitsu competition. I don't know. It's not like your student will lose and then be like, oh, my coach sucks. It's my coach's fault. And maybe that does happen, but very seldom do you ever see, like, I've seen people that don't teach actual jiu-jitsu, like that teach, I don't know, jiu-jitsu without the I. And they're like, yeah, I'm a Japanese jiu-jitsu black belt. Like, who'd you get that under? Like, my uncle. Like, who did he? What? And you see people like that all the time. And those guys will send out students to a jiu-jitsu tournament, and like the only thing that they ever taught them was that you only tap to arm locks and not chokes. And then all their guys get choked unconscious. You'll lose students doing that. But if you just give any little bit of jiu-jitsu that allows somebody to compete, and then when they win or they lose, you say, oh, well, we can fix this. We can help you with this. To me, that motivates somebody more to keep training than, no, we only do self-defense here. We're a self-defense first school. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that there should be a lot of forms of jiu-jitsu, but discouraging people from competing to me is a little bit wild. So next hot take. If you have a tattoo of your BJJ team's logo, you're in a cult. I don't know. That can be, if it's a requirement, yes, that's weird. If you have to get branded to be part of your team, or to be even to be a black belt on your team, it feels culty. But I remember one time I was talking to, who was I talking to? I was talking to Heath Pedigo. He was talking about people that get tattoos of the team. He goes, you know what I've always noticed? Those guys always leave the team. It's like, it's always the guys that get the tattoos that leave the team. And that's funny to me. But I think I have one guy that has a head nod tattoo. But I will say this. He also it's Eric Keebner. Who's been on the show a couple times, but he's also wrestled his whole life, and he wrestled for a bunch of different clubs, and he has a tattoo of each club on his arm that he wrestled for also. And so it was more of a like, these are places that I have trained at, that I've wrestled at, that I've grappled at. And that is more of like a memoir than anything. And so, that makes sense. One time, one of Kyle's students got a tattoo of Kyle's face on his leg. And I think it was more to be funny. I don't think Kyle was like, hey, you should get a tattoo of my face. But that was pretty awesome, honestly. It was pretty funny. And Kyle has a handlebar mustache in the tattoo. And I don't know if many coaches can claim that they had a student get a tattoo of their face. That's pretty impressive. And so maybe I'm part of a cult and I just didn't know it. Where are we at? Okay, so we'll finish with one more cult thing, and then I think we're out of cult things and we can kind of move on. Holy smokes, we're super deep into this episode. Let's go ahead and take a commercial break, and then we'll go into one more cult thing. This episode is brought to you by Kicksite. If you do not know, Kicksite is the premier group to use when it comes to student management, really when it comes to running a jiu-jitsu website, when it comes to running a jiu-jitsu school in general. And one of my favorite things about Kicksite is how they are constantly striving for perfection. They're constantly trying to get better. And when I see this in the coming weeks, they actually have another big uplift for new leads. When somebody signs up on your website to be able to try to get them into your gym and then eventually convert them to a student, they have made all these updates to make it simpler for you, to make it easier for you to be able to turn prospects into students. And they also have all kinds of free training to help you be able to turn prospects into students. And so if you are running a jiu-jitsu gym and you are not using Kicksite, you really are missing out on a big opportunity to just up the level of growth that your gym has. And so again, if you ever want to check out Kicksite, be sure to go to kicksite.com/Josh McKinney. There's a link in the description. They will give you a 30-day free trial to experience Kicksite for yourself. And at the end of that trial, you are going to say, oh yeah, I don't know how I ran a gym without them. Let's go ahead and get back to the episode. And we are back. So we have, honestly, we've hit this one a lot, but this was another. I just included all the things that people talked about jiu-jitsu cults in this one. There are BJJ cults that have crazier rules than actual religious cults. I don't know, man. Maybe there are, but I don't feel like you've watched enough documentaries on religious cults. Those are crazy, dude. And generally, they have to do with the head guys banging everybody's wife. That's usually one of the telltale signs. And then, the whole Kool-Aid drinking thing. I've never seen any jiu-jitsu school do that. I would rather my school make me take steroids than, make me drink the Kool-Aid. But yeah, I think that's our sound off on cults. We've really hammered the cult thing for a while. Let's move on to some other hot takes that are a little more random. Ban guard jumping, especially in lower rank and masters division. I honestly think that is something that should probably be banned completely everywhere. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, and it doesn't really do a whole lot. Like, it's not like you would be removing this big piece of jiu-jitsu. There are ways to get to close guard by sitting to your butt, or doing the foot and the hip guard pull. But yeah, guard jumping is incredibly dangerous. You could watch hours of videos of people getting their knees caved in from guard jumping. The other thing that is probably, and a lot of places do ban it, is like the scissor takedown off of the single leg. Dude, anytime Naga is banning something, like in all divisions, it's probably really bad. I once watched a guy get stabbed with a katana at a Naga, and no one even cared. You won his division. I'm just joking. That didn't happen. But yeah, banning jumping guard, horrible, horrible thing. Don't think we should allow it. You can still get robbed, jumped, and KO'd even if you're a BJJ black belt. Very true. Jiu-jitsu black belt does not make you impervious to danger, right? But if you ask me, would I rather have a black belt in jiu-jitsu and have the jiu-jitsu skill that I have if I was being robbed, jumped, or someone was trying to knock me out versus not having it? Yes. I feel like regardless of how the situation turned out, you would still be better prepared. Just simply because when a fight or flight type situation happens, your frontal lobe stops working, right? And it's like your ability to make decisions. And when you think about it from a standpoint, being able to know that, how to operate in stress and how to operate physically, how to still be able to hurt somebody while stressed, while in a stressful situation. Yeah, I would choose that over anything else. I mean, don't get me wrong. In any of those situations, I would rather have a gun. That would be better. But if I didn't, I would choose a black belt. Next one, many people, even black belts, don't understand how to elbow escape. Yes. Very interesting. Many people too, and I'll add this, even black belts can't hit an actual closed guard armbar. Cannot hit it in live training, ever. Yet, shrimping up and down the mat and armbar drills are the most common warm-ups still to this day in jiu-jitsu. So why is that? Why don't they, if everyone's drilling them, why can't people escape mount or side control? And why can't people hit close guard arm bars? Well, because they're not drilling the realistic situation. They're not learning how to actually accomplish the task. It's the equivalent of a kata. They're dancing, right? And so when you think about, and that's like, I like the term elbow escape over shrimp. You could use either term, but the thing is, you are trying to get somebody out of your elbow knee space, somebody that is on top of you, occupying your elbow knee space, right? Whether they're in side control or whether they're in mount, they are occupying your elbow knee space. You are flat on your back. How do you get unflat in order to get a leg in between, or to get their leg or their torso out of your elbow knee space? That is what an elbow escape or a shrimp is trying to accomplish. It's not a move. It's not a dance that you do. There are all kinds of angles that you can create to free your elbow knee space. There are all kinds of bumps that you can do. There are ways that you can try to feel where your opponent's weight is and bump them that way. And like, oh, now their leg is light, so then I can close my elbow knee space again, get their leg out of my elbow knee space. And so there are so many things in jiu-jitsu that people can get to black belt and still have no idea how to do. And so we see this over and over, and I think that really having somebody, or you yourself, kind of boiling down the technique again and saying, oh, this isn't the best way to do this. I should tweak this. I should change this. I should be better at this. That to me makes so much more sense. Let's go into, we'll just do a few more. Let's go into jiu-jitsu will never be a mainstream sport. And then I'm going to piggyback this one with a different hot take that I got, which was BJJ commentary sucks besides Gordon Ryan and Sean Williams. There are definitely people that you hear on the commentating teams of big events that are horrible. It's as if they don't know what's going on and they don't know the athletes, right? So if we look to other sports when it comes to growth, when it comes to commentary, something that was really interesting. I was watching this is years ago, on how the video game Madden changed how they would present in the NFL. Because there was the field wasn't mic'd, right? In Madden, you could hear the players run into each other and make noises and grunt and throw the ball and all these things. And so they started to mic the field because it made it feel more real, even though it made it feel more like Madden. It made it feel more like a real thing. And there are all these reasons that people are doing this. And the other thing to look at with football is like how commentary is and how much it's changed. So things that you will hear when you are watching an NFL game, you'll hear literally who the tight end is dating right now. And you'll hear fun facts about Taylor Swift. How crazy is that? What does that have to do with the NFL? Well, it doesn't. It's just storytelling. It's just something that keeps you more occupied. It keeps you more interested. You can't really say that everybody who watched the Super Bowl is a big football fan. A lot of people aren't football fans at all. But if you put the right guys, the right commentators in there, not only can they tell you little stories about like, yeah, this cornerback donated $1 million to this organization this year. And you're like, oh, that's cool. I love that organization. I like this cornerback now. And they tell stories that way. But then the other thing that you're seeing more and more of now, and I think that like Tony Romo is the guy that really changed the game on this, is they explain the game to you. Because the game is complex, right? Just like jiu-jitsu. This is why it's going to be hard for jiu-jitsu to be mainstream, is because from the outside perspective of somebody who doesn't do jiu-jitsu, it looks like two dudes rolling around on the ground. And then eventually there's a submission and you're like, oh, that looked like it hurt, right? But you don't understand the intricacies of what made that submission happen. And to me, the only way, and that's like Sean Williams, I think, is the best at this, which is who this person put in their hot take. Sean Williams will explain jiu-jitsu that is happening in a very simple way. For instance, a guy will be trying to pass half guard, and he will say something along the lines of, the top guy needs to get chest to chest here, right? And then you see it happen, and even if you have no idea why that matters, you'll go, oh my gosh, it happened. That thing that guy said, it happened. He knew that was the fight. And then he'll say, top guy's got to keep the bottom player flat here. And you'll go, oh, okay. And then you'll start to go, oh, he's not flat anymore. This is, and then you'll see a sweep happen, right? And it seems like he just predicted the future. But really, he just understood jiu-jitsu very, very well. And when you deeply understand something, you can often explain it to a 5-year-old. And for people that don't know jiu-jitsu at all, that's how they need it explained to them. And so I do think, I'll say this, with jiu-jitsu being a mainstream sport, I think that jiu-jitsu, honestly, right now is at the ground floor. I really, really believe that. I think that we are 1% out of 100 from where jiu-jitsu will end up. And of course, this is partially having one of the biggest jiu-jitsu podcasts that there is. And so maybe there's some self-belief there for me being like, I am at the ground floor right now of this really big thing. But I don't think that is necessarily the reason. The reason I think this is because I've seen over the last 16 years where jiu-jitsu was. I remember doing pans in 2011. We went to California, and one of like the first night we get there, we go out to eat, and our server pointed at my shirt and he goes, "Oh, you guys do jiu-jitsu. One of my roommates does jiu-jitsu." And our jaws were on the floor. I've been training for 3 years at this point, but our jaws were on the floor. We're like, what? You know about jiu-jitsu? Anytime someone would see a jiu-jitsu shirt that I had, they would be like, "Oh, you do jiu-jitsu?" And then do a karate chop. And I'm like, no, that's not what I do. That's not the same thing. But this guy actually knew jiu-jitsu. And then for me in the Midwest, that didn't start happening until, probably 5, 8, 10 years later, where people would see your shirt and go, "Oh, I know somebody that does jiu-jitsu." Or occasionally like, "Oh, I also train jiu-jitsu." Now we're getting to this point where people at least know what it is. But there are so many people that have not tried it yet. There are so many people that could try it and just haven't done it yet. And so I think that that's why I think we are just on the ground floor. It's just now getting talked about. To jiu-jitsu people, it's like, "Oh, it's just huge. Everybody knows about jiu-jitsu." They really don't. There are so many people that you deal with on the day-to-day that know the word, but they don't have any idea what jiu-jitsu is. They've never experienced it for themselves. I think that we are just now getting to the point where it's going to start to really explode. But the other prediction that I have with this is it's not going to be standard. It's not going to be this standardized thing like you do jiu-jitsu and I do jiu-jitsu, and we're going to know that we both do the same thing. And this is important. This is how it should be. I used to not have this opinion either, but now I'm of the opinion that there should be schools that shrimp up and down the mat and make you wear a mandatory gi. Because to be honest, there are a lot of people that love that. That is the part of jiu-jitsu that they care about experiencing. Now, there's also going to be room for no-gi only schools. And there's going to be room for completely unaffiliated schools. And there's going to be room for all kinds of different things. And there are going to be different versions of the sport of jiu-jitsu. There is going to be gi and there's going to be no gi, but there's going to be rule sets that make things totally different. I had hinted at the jiu-jitsu games for you guys, but when we were doing this, we were like, man, even if this doesn't blow up, even if this doesn't make us rich and famous, this is a game changer, because this is a brand new expression of jiu-jitsu that I don't think, at least from my perspective, no one has done yet. And the fact that we can even have that claim shows how early we are in the jiu-jitsu space. And so I think that is where I will leave you guys with. I have so many more hot takes, and so we're going to do another hot take episode this week. If you guys have any hot takes for me, send me an email, josh@simplifyingjiu-jitsu, or I'll be sure to check my DMs on my desktop before I record next Wednesday. And so, send me an Instagram message if you would like to do that. But besides that, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and I hope that today's episode helps you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day, guys.